Everyone, good morning. Ed Lance here with Dome Fest West. And today we have our Full Dome Forums on utilizing domes in flying theaters for next gen entertainment. We have a couple awesome speakers, Valerie Johnson-Redrow and Joe Conover. And just so you know, Dome Fest West is an annual film festival and we're currently accepting submissions of immersive films. Your immersive films um, can be converted from VR to show on a dome if you can bake it into a film. Yeah, submit your film for next year's the 2025 May. What is it? May 1st through 5th? Is it, Ryan?
The first through fourth, yes.
First through fourth, thank you. And speaking of Ryan, Ryan is our executive director, and Ryan is going to moderate the session today. So take it away, Ryan.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Moore. I am the executive director of Dome Fest West, and I am very excited to be joined by two absolute titans in the theme park industry and in kind of the theme entertainment world in general. And we're going to be talking about some of their really cool work in the flying theater type industry or the flying theater use case of domes. To kick things off, though, with all of our attendees, as people are coming in, I'm launching a poll. We want to know how you understand or what you think of the flying theater world at this point in time. So we ask you to go ahead, take a look at this poll. These are some easy questions, single choice, multiple choice. You're not going to be graded on this. So don't worry about wrong answers. We just want to know your thoughts. Because a lot of times in the planetarian world, when we see domes, we may forget that there are so many great uses of these incredible pieces of architecture. It's not just about showing the stars, though that is one of the most powerful use cases. There are also different amazing ways to utilize these structures to bring joy and surprise and awe to different audiences. Our brothers and sisters in technology are these flying theaters. They've been doing it for a number of years. I'm going to just share a quick little educational. We'll call this a cliff notes on the flying theater industry. You may not know it as the flying theater industry. You may know it as Soarin'. It's just one of those things at Disneyland. And this is probably one of the more popular just single use cases. There are different ways that this got it right, some ways that we might hear that they could have done better. But essentially, it's where you have a curved screen, and as a writer, you get onto some sort of a contraption, and then you get taken up into the screen. And then there's a beautiful film that plays. There's sometimes different effects, smell, wind, etc., and it produces quite the impression. And there's a lot of different companies that are in this space. We're going to hear about a few of them. I don't actually have Christie listed in this space, Joe, but yeah, we should list Christie in here too. Though
Right.
I don't think you guys just specialize in this as much as maybe these other companies do.
Correct.
But I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and we've got some responses back from our poll. So, ooh, it looks like question number 6 so far is fairly interesting. There's some different responses. Let's see if we can get a few more submissions in. Let's see. A
Very
few.
interesting. That sounded a little intense there.
Well, the rating, yeah. What's the most what number 6? Rank these potential benefits
Mhm.
of the industry networking from least to most valuable. It sounds like everyone wants different things, but they want access to cutting edge technology, which I know both y'all are going to bring, as well as marketing insights and joint venture opportunities. So here, this is where I should really turn it over to our amazing panelists. I want to introduce both Valerie Johnson-Redrow and Joseph Conover. We're going to let them both introduce themselves. We're going to start actually with Valerie here. Valerie, you have a long history of working with different companies as well as on flying theaters in different countries, specifically China. Beautiful Hunan, you've worked with Kraftwerk. Let me just let you take it on from here and maybe introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi. So I had an unusual beginning to my career. I was an animal behaviorist working at the Bronx Zoo in New York, took animals on television, got the production bug. Then I learned traditional film, TV, got a job at Disney and heard about, wow, what do they do, at Imagineering? And I was lucky enough that they were starting the Disney MGM studios. So I got a job because of my knowledge in production, not because I'm an artist or engineer. And I got to work on Body Wars, which was a really fun after the Disney MGM Studios, which was more traditional media content, but on flat screen. And then I got a job to produce the content for Body Wars, and that was my first simulator ride attraction. So I learned about the importance of all the integration and how you move content with the image. I mean, how you move the image with the vehicle that you're in, and it was just a learning experience. So then I moved on to Universal, and I learned about more of the dome projection issues with King Kong 360 3D. So there we were integrating a ride vehicle with big domes on either side of you. If you want to call them a dome, they were giant curved screens. And then I went to I'd say I worked on a project for the Wanda Wuhan uh, first kind of theme park in China uh, where they built an area based theme park, and that was my first flying attraction. So I'll show that later, but that's how I got into the industry, learning on the job.
That's awesome. Do you want to go ahead and show us some of those actually
Oh,
right
oh,
now, if you don't mind?
absolutely. Okay, so as I said, the first flying theater job was called Hubei in the Air. It was for the Wanda Wuhan Park, and I kind of got in after they had done some of the concept, and Pixamondo was doing the content. So I had to oversee it as a producer role. So I'll play you. Actually, it's a good little demo here of what the project was. I am going to share my screen. Okay, share, and now I'm going to make this big and play it.
December 2014 marked the grand opening of the Wanda Movie Park in Wuhan, which is located in the wonderful province of Hubei. The Wanda Movie Park, built by the Dalian Wanda Group, offers 6 unique multi-sensory experiences, which are situated in an iconic building designed by Stewfish Entertainment Architects from London. The Toronto-based theme park design team from Forek was responsible for the concept and schematic design of the attractions. Hubei in the Air, one of the park's signature attractions, is so far the biggest flying theater worldwide. The attraction has 2 fly theaters that are located side by side for maximum capacity and were built by Dynamic Attractions from Canada. The experience begins as you enter the queue line. It's like walking deep into the natural beauty of the Hubei province, with waterfalls, rocks, and trees surrounding you. Pagodas frame the walls of the queue and give you the feeling of being miles away from the pulsating city life in Wuhan. A charming old artist appears on the way to the Fly Theater, telling us about our journey, and presents the safety instructions. Upon entering the attraction's main theater, the guests board in one of 3 rows, with a total attraction capacity of 72 seats. With everybody seated safely, clouds appear below and surround every visitor while the platform is lifted up into the air. The experience of Dynamic Attractions' new ride system called True Flight Motion which was developed to use electrical instead of hydraulic components, allows completely smooth motion. 3 4K projectors allow the brightest resolution of all fly theaters around the world. The show opens with the biggest Chinese brush painting ever created, which comes to life. Story and art were created by Fouric, while the award-winning studio Pixmondo produced the media. Also, the music was specially composed for Hubei in the air. Visitors follow the flight of a crane that dips and darts through valleys, monuments, and clouds, revealing the rich history of the Hubei province. The beauty unfolds when each and every new location is displayed over the 5 minutes long experience. From the snow-ridden winter in Wudang Mountain, the holy land of Taoism culture, to the mysterious forests of Shenangjia. From the Yangtze, the longest river in Asia, to the Three Gorges Dam. A highlight is the epic Battle of Red Cliffs, which depicts the end of the Han Dynasty 1800 years ago. Finally, the crane leads the guests back to the famous Yellow Crane Tower, standing in the center of Wuhan. Wind incentive effects, like the smell of blossoms, were used wisely and not overdone. At the end of the ride, guests exit through the fully themed merchandise shop. Since the grand opening of the Wanda Movie Park.
Okay, I'll stop it there. Oh, let me stop it.
Very cool.
So at least we did that before COVID happened, since COVID began in that area. So one of the things about that project was that for our flying attraction, the building worked great. But the way that the building was built for other projects, it was a problem because they didn't really design the building so that one attraction on a floor didn't affect the one above it. So they had calibration issues on projectors for some of the others. So our attraction was a big hit. Everybody loved it. But so just as a filmmaker, you have to make sure that sorry, I just got distracted with that. As a filmmaker, you have to make sure for your own attraction, right, that you're doing testing and that you make sure that everything is bought off, if you will, approved by the owner. Because there was one point on one of the stereo attractions where they didn't want to pay the bill because the image was fuzzy. Well, that's because the two projectors were not aligned that were showing the stereo. So it gets tricky when you're working in other countries. So and another thing about Hubei in the Air is we really worked with the culture of the country and found out certain things that you can and can't show, or symbols that are important. So the content is super important for each kind of province in China. So a lot of learning lessons on that project. So the next one that I did in China is called Beautiful Hunan. And I'm going to share this. This was another area it's called Changsha. And this particular area is known for a kiln. And this kiln is from ancient ages, where that was the culture of their area. It was the beginning of the Silk Road, where people did pottery. And this is a story all about that. So I'm going to share again. Okay. Play this. All right, technical issues. It's supposed to play. Here we go. So we use a combination. I did a lot of the scouting. Here, I'll do it ahead of time. I did a lot of the scouting for this show, where we worked closely with the government of Changsha and this company, Macrolink, and we plotted out where are we going to take the drones and the helicopters. And one of the shots goes through this famous rock formation where you actually had to turn the helicopter sideways. So we had to hire, this famous pilot in China that could do this flight stunt. It was very interesting. And in one, they all have a favorite part of the time of the year that they want to shoot it. So we had to do a lot of, CGI visual effects on top of photography. So it got very interesting. So I'm going to play it now. You can see it. As you can see, cranes are an important part of the Chinese culture. So you're very often following a flying crane. So this is a different ride system. Okay, so on that one, we had to add a lot of things for the time of year. Um, one of those was, for example, the rice fields full of water. So we shot, the terrain. We had to add a lot of effects. I remember getting a phone call in the middle of the night that this famous thing called rants, which is the ice on the edges of the branches, were happening that night. And the the Chinese group wanted me to find a photographer to come out and shoot that happening. I said, no, we can take care of that, right, in visual effects. So there were a lot of cultural things that we overcame, but that was a really fun project to work on. The final one I'm going to share was done in Malaysia. It just opened recently because this was Independence Day, and it was done when the IP wasn't owned by Disney yet. So as soon as we made the film, Disney purchased the IP. So we had to wait and open the attraction. But this is a much more involved attraction where well, let's see. Let me just get this up here. I tried to utilize a lot of the CG elements that were made for the. Sorry, exit full screen. Okay, and here we go. So when we designed the media for this attraction, because you're dealing with an IP that people do know about, you have to kind of keep a concept that is a little bit set. So we made this. The context was that you're in Kuala Lumpur, and you're dealing with post-apocalyptic Kuala Lumpur. So we actually took imagery of the landscape so that we could rebuild it futuristically. We created a lot of elements like vehicles that we made for the pre-show that we used in the main film. So we were trying to, make sure all of our efforts were kind of cross usage. And I'm going to share it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it afterward. So this is part of the pre-show.
Valerie, do you want to try resharing your screen? It doesn't look like it got shared.
I'm sorry, what?
Do you mind trying to reshare? I'm not seeing it.
Oh,
I don't know if it's up.
okay. Gonna do it again.
Yeah, no problem. There we go. Yeah.
So this is the pre-show. We hired, obviously, people from Malaysia. We actually hired a comedian because he was well liked. We created a lot of these CGI assets and then put them into the film for both the pre-show because we were responsible for like the whole. It was a very large show with a lot of throughput. Uh, we as I said, use the story of a futuristic Kuala Lumpur. So when you see this, it actually imitates the terrain of Kuala Lumpur.
The development of Star Tower's wormhole generator allows research and defense teams to travel at faster than light speed to anywhere in the galaxy. The Flying Command Center can transport research and defense teams virtually anywhere to explore the mysteries of the universe, to detect and investigate any alien threat, and if necessary, coordinate a full-scale defense against an actual alien attack. It has also been newly equipped with alien...
I'm going to fast forward here because we're talking about aliens, and what we actually had done is create an actual alien, but this is an actual prop, kind of an animatronic. So here he is.
Don't be alarmed. Our alien friend here has been placed in a deep-induced coma.
He's in a coma.
And poses no danger. The ESD has been studying this living alien to help us understand our enemies from the inside out.
And then something goes horribly wrong.
Stay there, okay? Hello, Max.
Contacted by
Max, come in.
an
Max,
external.
we're having code red.
So now we have to go into the theater and save the world. So now everybody gets into the... And what I like about this is that we created something on the screen as you walk into the theater. And then when the screen is revealed, the magic of a flying theater is just kind of, whoa, looking
Looks
down.
like you're taking the Wormhole Express after all. I'm transmitting coordinates to the Star Towers for our mission to Titan. We are good to go. Recruits, this is the main underground hangar of the ESD.
So we built
Just
this
a
whole
small underground fleet here and the
underground
command center
network.
in Kuala Lumpur.
Typical futuristic thing.
You are about to see our next-gen hybrid fighter prototype 2, fully armed and ready to come to our defense. Say hello to our squad leader, Wolfman.
Don't worry, recruits. We got your back.
Hey, Valerie, can you move your cursor?
Thanks, Wolfman. We are ready
Can I
to
do what?
guide us through the wormhole generator.
Follow me.
You did it. Thank you.
I even had a role there doing that voiceover.
What a view! Recruits, have you ever seen Kuala Lumpur like this before?
So we designed every single building here. It was painstaking. There was so much work that went into this project.
And load.
All systems are go. Prepare for launch.
Engage wormhole generator.
Wormhole generator at full power.
Okay, prepare for jump to hyperspeed. Welcome
So now
to
we go
Saturn.
into outer space. I'm not going to play the whole show, but we get into a fight where we go and destroy the generator. Just gonna kind
My
of...
scan should have picked them up.
So here's another interior that we had to create.
That makes no sense. It's a trap.
Get in a big fight, and then
We've got to reach the central core and destroy it.
so a lot of effects here where
Only you have the
move
tech to take it out.
program the chairs, right? You go with like
Affirmative. That should solve the problem.
Let's move.
the content. you would feel a little bit of the G-force somehow.
Powering up.
That's it, move and light it up. Move back.
Okay, so you get the idea. This was
Wow.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to control my screen here.
That's amazing. It's a little further step than soaring over California or
Yeah,
over the
so
world.
that's what made that attraction so much fun because so let's do a quick case study. 'Cause I don't want to go on forever, but this particular attraction, they built the building in Kuala Lumpur up on that hill, the very place. They have a casino up there that they wanted to attract people from Kuala Lumpur, locals as well as tourists if they come. It was a windy road getting up there. So getting the construction crews was, it was definitely doable. They have a lot of manpower, but they mistakenly made the big door too small to fit the ride system in. So right as we were getting ready to like open this attraction and it had a very tight schedule to get it done, they had to tear down like the side of the building to get the actual ride system when it got there, rebuild. And then we went in and again, you have to really work closely with, in this case, it was, my God, it was craft work um, or I think it was, or dynamic. It doesn't really matter because it wasn't their fault, but we have to work very closely with them on the all of the technical specs, all of the deliverable specs, right? And in this case, we did. We planned it in advance, and if we hadn't, it could have been a disaster. So this attraction opened. I think it's pretty popular. I haven't even gotten to see it since it's done, but the fun of this was actually, manipulating the crowds that you felt, and we designed it. We worked, did a previs in Unreal, had everything plotted out before we got there. Okay, I think that's all I have to share. I'm passing it over
That's
to any questions, or we're going to do that
w-
later.
we'll do that later. We'll do
Yeah.
some more questions, but thank you so much, Valerie, for that awesome just essentially run through of three different amazing attractions that are being produced outside of the United States. It's not here in the US that may be taking the lead on the world on this. Not on flying theaters, but like we're getting there. And it's a huge credit to Valerie on setting the bar high. We're gonna go to Joe here now to essentially have him introduce himself, some of the work he's been doing. Joseph Conover is a long time audiovisual guru, I guess you could call yourself. He, I think one of the biggest feathers in his cap is that if you've been to Area 15 in Las Vegas, then you've seen a huge amount of his work. But you've worked with Sharp, then Panasonic, and now at this point in time, the man is director of immersive entertainment and live event production at Christie Digital. So, Joe, do you mind kind of taking it away, sharing a little bit? Actually, here, really quickly, before I hand it over to Joe, I'm going to end this poll. I left this open a little bit long. So I'm ending the poll, and I'm going to share the results with everyone. You got the results, but take those results, put those to the side, and read those while we're letting Joe have a chance. Not necessarily to throw you under the bus, Joe. I'm sure you're actually
No,
curious
not at
about
all.
these results
I appreciate
as
it.
well.
And
But
thank you for teeing it up there. I have been in the business a long time. If you consider my career starting in high school with all those geeks in the AV closet that used to wheel out the TV and VCR for you on those slow days, that was certainly myself. Um, and now here, as you mentioned, most recently with Christie as a director of immersive entertainment, live events, and virtual production, with a priority on projection for those installations. And I will say, just going back to your original poll here, Ryan, number 6 is, very meaningful to myself as well as I look over the results. But the opportunities for networking is truly poignant in this because it's exactly that. My position, most recently at Christie and with Panasonic for many years in an immersive space, was just that. Whereas companies now look to get directly involved in these installations. We used to be really kind of not shoulder to shoulder with our clients. It was more of traditional through distributions and third parties that would just buy projectors. But as Valerie mentioned, these are very detailed installations that large scope of works and many things that can go in different directions. So over the years, it has become a need for the clients to deal with us directly. So we get involved very early in the process now. We get involved directly. We are able to help hone the projector design for this, because as you mentioned, it's not just buying projectors and putting them on shelves. In a lot of cases, depending on scale, these are very large units, some 200 pounds. Most recently, my last project that I can talk about was in Macau at Wind Palace Macau, where Illuminarium put forth an experience that was multi-chapter walkthrough, not a dome per se, but just as a use case, some 50,000 lumen projectors. So you can imagine the lift of the technology, and that's not to mention the servers and the sound system, which was holoplot in that case, and haptic floors and all these things that immerse you. These are very large projects when you look at that type of scale. And yeah, there's something that always doesn't go right, as Valerie knows. A great case example, as you mentioned, Area 15. We did a thing called the portal at Area 15, and you know, it looked cut and dry. Let's put the projectors up in the ceiling. It was a lovely immersive room, 4 walls and a floor. And then a focus issue came out of that. And after trial and tribulations and measurements, we realized because of the heat in Vegas in the summer, the building was actually expanding. And the building expanded up to 1.5 inches. So the roof was moving as it's meant to do. Well, that's great for a structure, but not great for projection when you're trying to align and keep everything in focus. So it really took some thinking process, and I believe they painted the roof a different color. So anything can happen, and it's really vital that we work hand in hand with our partners who are doing the design, who are doing the motion works, as you see here in these big rigs that carry people, and then also who build the screen types and the domes and what material that is. But again, going back to the point here on 6 is having a network where we can get a close relationship and really get hand in hand and help advise what's going on and help make suggestions on lensing and all the technical issues and all the playback things that can be done. It's very expansive, and we are happy to help. And then the marketing aspect and the partnering aspect is one of those things too. So in that case, I choose to not do things twice. So I look for unique experiences where, I mean, we do multiple things numerous times, but when it comes to finding a priority project and we can help promote and drive demand, we really get behind that, and that becomes a direct relationship with Christy in this most recent case. But I will share with you a video real quick of just some of my my sizzle reel. It's just some of the project I was involved in, and not necessarily all immersive, quite honestly, but not necessarily dome, but it's very quick. Let me share this with you if you don't mind, and let me know if there's anything that goes awry, Ron.
Yeah, can't wait. Sounds good.
All right. Sharing. Should have a visual. So this is all projected mapping on a large scale. That's a Illuminarium, Atlanta location, mapping San Francisco. Area 15. That was one great concert we did in the pandemic. My good friend Bart Stresser there. We did a lot of projects with him over the years. That was on the Disney Concert Hall, downtown LA, that silver, beautiful building. That was hologram, very cool. the tree of life. And there you go.
Nice.
So again, a lot of these use cases are large, but I've worked very hard over the years to create scale in that. So not all of these projects, as the most recent, especially coming out of the pandemic, where a lot of things were big, big, big. That's not the only thing we work on. Quite honestly, most of my things in development, projects in development, are of a different scale, and I've worked very hard to make sure there's scale of economies there. So when you do a flying theater, and it's using some heavy equipment, and certainly the cost of these structures can be quite overwhelming. That's why you see investment from China most recently really taking over. It's just the nature of the monetary value and globally right now. And it will change. There's going to be things that change, and it will move on. But those big global projects are wonderful, but there's a lot of use cases for other things like museums and science exhibits and planetariums where they just don't have that budget. So I struggled very hard to find other solutions, and we're very lucky here at Christie to have the sort of thought throughput to the factory to create things. So having something in 4K with a one chip projector instead of a three chip projector, a multitude of lenses that you can create those bounces and those adjustments to hit any size scale. The software within that is the geometry correction and the way we keystone things and blend things. Actually, domes are not as heavy as a challenge as a 90-degree wall, quite honestly, when you're trying to match everything to the 90-degree wall. But all of them include some good work. So we work very hard on working with some of our processors for media output, some of the projectors to find a really nice, bright, one-chip, lightweight solution that can be utilized. And whereas some of these projects were in the $10 million range, for projection and media players, now you're looking, we can get somewhere in a much more easier budget. So we worked very hard. Those are most recent. Those are most of my conversations coming out of Infocom and ISE last year. People are really looking for an immersive experience and these dome theaters and domes that can be utilized on a different scale and a different budget to be successful. And we've worked on many solutions for that, including financing options for that, which eases the pain of capital expenditures on that. I personally always rather have you focus on what Valerie does. We put more money and capital into content, in the creation of content. For us, we're all more successful. It doesn't make a lot of sense just to do a huge tech stack and have no IP, have no storytelling, have no content that is really moving. So I work very hard again on doing that. So you can do an OpEx solution and pay for technology over a period of time and be able to maintain that as well. People forget about that, and I'm sure everybody knows if you've done it. Projectors are great, but they're not self-sufficient. It's much like a car. You do have to keep them serviced and working well, or things become unhinged real quickly. Blending becomes, you can see this in some cases where the projectors start operating at different brightnesses, or there's a blend, you see a band in it. Things change over time. So they have to be maintained. And again, having that relationship over a multitude of years certainly helps that. I will also say for Christie's benefit, having the experience in cinema and supporting cinema projectors for so many years, 100 years now, that backbone of supports and the softwares within and the developments certainly adds to immersive experiences and flying theaters and domes. And we're very honored and lucky to be working on them all over the world. But again, I love where it's going. I love where the travel experiences are going. The pop-ups are starting to happen, and trying to help those clients as well in those projects. We work very hard to do that.
Amazing, amazing. Yes, and it's awesome that we kind of have both sides of this coin of success here, and that is the technical aspect, building something that can deliver technically, and then the IP that takes advantage of every technical kind of little uh, extra way to get into the audience.
Yeah, you will not be successful unless people come out talking about the story and telling somebody else. Nobody's talking about the technology, right? That's just the immersive experience. We're trying to immerse it, hide you from that, get you involved in a 4D or 5D experience. but it has to be storytelling. That's what you're going to tell your friends and family when you're in.
Agreed. So let's kind of do some discussion here a little bit about the wider topic of domes in flying theaters and also themed entertainment. Um, but let's also, I want to encourage, yes, all you audience members, there will be a chance for us to answer your direct questions using the Q&A feature. I see there's already a number of questions in there. Please add your questions if you don't see a question like what you're thinking in there, and then upvote each other's questions so that we can know what is most what everyone is kind of thinking and wanting to know more about. Let's go ahead and just kind of start off. Valerie, we'll look at from a creative perspective, and then Joe will jump into some of the technical challenges of this. But when you're creating a flying attraction or a themed attraction like this, where do domes enter the conversation? Are they an absolute starting point? What maybe advantages, Valerie, can you say out from a creative? Do you see just the curve structure bringing before you bring the ride systems and even the larger creative like flying aspects? Just from a creative, how do you see that dome canvas, and what does that present in terms of opportunities?
I mean, the key to the dome is the curved screen, right? It's very immersive. So I mean, from King Kong, right? That was just going to be like little flat vignettes, and it turned into, oh, can you just do it all in media? Oh, and make it 3D. I mean, that was literally the demand for King Kong attractions. So we just filled up the place. That was Electrosonic and Peter Anderson. And by the way, I wish I'd had you, Joseph, as a Christie guy on that. We had Christie 2K projectors, but when we did the design for, I'm not doing a dome attraction right now, but for the King Kong attraction, they built it with not enough room for a technician to walk behind the Christie projector to service it. So we had to do a pop out of the building. So that's how important it is, right? To have a rep from every person, no matter a dome, whatever your immersive attraction is, you need to have members of every team looking at drawings, looking at models, constantly, because there's always an issue that shows up. So I'd say, and for the dome, to me, it's immersive. And I love that you have people enter a building, they get in a chair, they're not just sitting there, they move, right? And so that physical piece of lifting someone up, or getting a different vantage point, you you can't think about anything else, right? You're focused on the image, your body is taken somewhere else, so you have a captive audience. Nobody's looking at their phone unless they're trying to videotape it, and then they drop it. So you learn
Secretly
really quickly not
capture
to do
it.
that. Yeah, it's because it takes you into another world. So that's why I like the dome. What other did I note? Everything else here. To me, it's a bit of a space saving thing, right? You bring people in, and then you either lift up the ride system, but it's kind of space saving because you can get a lot of people and then distribute them, into a vertical. And I think that's part of it, because it's all about throughput, right? These rides, and I saw something. What are the economics of 72 seats? I mean, it's all about how many people do you need to pulse through, and that determines the length of your show. And usually, they're because of the economics of the cost of the content. Typically, like a 5-minute show is pretty feasible, because by the time you put people into a pre-show, for the same amount of time, you pulse them into the main show, right? You're determining how many people can get through. When I was at Disney, it was like 600 people an hour. That was the big ticket show, and how you had to be able to accommodate that many people in an hour. I think it's gone up now for some of these, uh, but for some of the big theme parks. Anyway, that's my answer to that.
Yeah,
No, that's great. Joe, yeah, go ahead.
I think that's a very interesting point. And when you saw Soaring go in, and I think it was 2001 now, one of the biggest negative feedbacks, especially in the parks and the ticketed entry, is that of waiting in a queue, right? And they do many, many things to help ease the time and stop the children from crying in a queue to keep you moving. But again, I think that was a surprise coming out of flying theaters is that it moves a lot of people quick, right? So it's not a long wait time. You can actually go back and experience that possibly more than once within a park day. And you see that there's people go back and you are completely immersed in that. And you're immersed because you're being put pretty much inside that dome, right? So now you're surrounded at least 180, whatever that might be, your peripheral vision, everything's covered. So you're automatically immersed. And then when you take into account the ride system and its movements, it just gives you that feeling of falling. So, like on Simpsons, you're on a roller coaster, you get that same guttural feeling of being on a roller coaster with very little movement. It's not a lot of movement when you take a look at the actual mechanics of the ride, but it just tricks your body and your visual and your brain to thinking that you're falling forward or backwards. I think it was a big surprise, and I think that's why it was adopted so quickly because you can move so many people through. It was just announced, and I don't want to speculate who's involved because I'll probably get it wrong. But I think they just announced in the last week or so that they're getting ready to launch a 305 seat flying theater somewhere in the world. 305 seats that are going to be so
Wow.
it's quite amazing. But again, it's all that lovely visual. It's everything that you can put in there. It's actually more of a challenge in immersive rooms that we do to create that immersion. You have to work a lot harder and actually probably do more technology with sound and haptics and feelings because you want that same experience, that communal feeling where you're in there like a concert, which is also a nice way because you're feeling that energy of everybody, right? So everyone's engaged at the same time. So when we do those communal walkthrough experiences like illuminariums per se on a larger scale, 10,000 square foot room with projection on walls and floors and haptics, and you're doing real time rendering where you're walking around and seeing footprints and movement, you're actually interacting. Um, we have to use LiDAR cameras in these cases because we're mapping skeletons. In a lot of cases, you can actually manipulate the content or crowdsource that as we look forward to new things. So there's a lot of new and emerging technologies that are being implemented to create more of a visual experience and more of a interactive experience where you actually participate in that storyline and maybe manipulate the content to a different outcome, which would be really neat to see in the future. So it's not the same thing over and over. So when you do go back, it might be a whole different experience, right? And we're getting ready to really do that. But again, it's on different scales, and I think that's quite the success of the flying theaters. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. It's actually, working in the ticket environments. I do hope we see some new ones here. There has been some great adoption in the flying theaters and domes around here on a much smaller scale where that ride movement isn't all that. You can do great things with little movement and just being immersed in a dome, again, on a different financial scale for those other smaller parks that are operating out there. Legoland, and they're all working on different things. So there's many different variations of a flying theater. Not all of them have to be so grand in its scale to give you the same illusion or the same effect.
Yeah, and because there's so many different ways of, it sounds like, combining both the technical possibilities, mixing all these different senses, movement, smell, and then just the creative possibilities. I would love to hear maybe even just your 30-second response, Valerie, and then Joe. Do you think the content has hit the limit on what you can do technically? Like have we started hitting the limit at all, Valerie? And then Joe, I see you're ready, but we're yeah, well, ladies first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think with what I've noticed with the flying theater that you really need the more you can set up ahead of time so that people get the story because once you're lifted and you're flying, and you're feeling the wind or you're feeling, the effects of a special effect like heat, like with the explosions, all of that. It's the more you can set up ahead of time so that people aren't questioning, right? They're just like, wow, they're just totally immersed in it, the better. So I think the more elaborate pre-shows are really good for that. And then, yeah, we haven't hit. It's just a matter of money, right, for the content, really, because if you want it to be photo real, right, it's a whole nother step. And as I said, on all the ones I did, it was a combination of drone photography, scanning, I mean, photogrammetry, everything was involved in pretty much all of those attractions. So, yeah, I would just say that the more you can set up in the pre-show, the more power the actual flying theater has, because you're just experiencing it and you know why.
A connection to the understanding. Yeah, yeah, Joe, your chance, your thoughts as well. The technical
Yeah,
as the
yeah,
creative
I
nature.
think, again, all great points. And I think where we're at is a really interesting place when it comes to content, and not just content, it's really show control. So when you're doing the content, everything's timed, right? So every movement is timed with show control systems. So the lights and the different effects and the heat and the mist and 5D, all these things are timed out. I think what we're going to see now, and I don't want to be the AI guy, but it is coming, right? So having the ability to be able to do more natural movement without having the limitations of show control. Can I manipulate that? Can we manipulate what the crowd is doing and how they're interacting? Can we create live content on the fly? We're doing that in movies right now, right? So we're doing that in cinematic things that I'm working on, where AI can fill a 2 minute gap where the actor has been offset for 4 months, right? So AI can generate a four-piece movement of that actor in doing that. So I think, and every 6 months it's going to be mind blowing, the things that are coming out, as you can see in other areas of the news. But I think its implications and what we're doing as far as show control and the limitations thereof show control, just by its nature, it's really just old computer, O's and O's and ones, and what's on, what's off. I think we're going to see something more fluid in the future. I certainly hope for that, and I think it'll be a much more moving and organic experience. Um, but we're at a very interesting time. It's very exciting, and it's always changing and always emerging.
Mm. Agreed. But now that these, like, there'll always be new additions, but these venues are built and they've got these experiences. Some of these experiences, it sounds like, Valerie, some of yours were purpose built for the location, and they were something that, are those traveling at all, or are those always going to just be shown there? Is there other content coming in that are opportunities for creators?
Yeah, I mean, you can they're updating Soaring, right? They've done that, Soaring over
Mhm.
California, I think, once. So you can always update once you've done it. Kind of hard to make a traveling, except like Triotech companies like that. There's smaller systems that you can move around, but there's so much that goes into a big flying theater. It's not really transportable, but definitely updatable. But then you've got to theme it to whatever the pre-show was if you don't want to spend a lot of money. But we did have to take some things out with the Fox Genting Park that went to Malaysia, right? Never opened. Then they had to tear out a lot of the IP. It was a nightmare because Disney bought Fox, right? And so, or bought that part of the IP. So you can always do it. Like I said, in manpower, right? If you work in a country where they've got a million workers just ready to run in there and make a change, you can do things a lot more quickly overseas than you could in America. But yeah, I mean, it's uh, it's just a matter of yeah, it's a matter of how big the attraction is, whether it's transportable or not.
Yeah, I think it's also very interesting. Formatting content is not easy. So look at traditional cinema. Cinematic screens are all the same size, right? So if you have one movie that plays in California, that same movie is going to play in India or somewhere else, right? Without reformatting. What happens is a lot of these fixed locations are built on the confines of what you're building. A lot of times they don't always match formatting. So it's not very easy to move content to another without going through the laborious and expensive procedure of reformatting that and trying to make that work. So for those who are trying to do that on the same scale, it's much easier, and it ends up saving a lot of money in the end. I think it was very interesting too. One of the most recent challenges content we dealt with is there's a show that runs at the Illuminariums, and it's a space oriented show, and we had Macau, and then they wanted that. But our version of space and space exploration is much different than the Republic of China version. So it all had to be re-synthesized and reformatted and redone at an expense, but it was in the budget to do so. But it's very interesting when you look at what plays elsewhere. And I think that's really interesting. If you do get a chance to travel and see these other experiences, it's much more different. The content is so different culturally, as Valerie has done a great job in those things that are important to those regions of the world that you might not necessarily get, that point of view from. But yeah, formatting is definitely a challenge. So if you can build it out at a fixed location, and please try to do it the same screen size at least to see what you can do. But again, it's very different too from fixed locations to travel or pop up. That's two different really sides of my head that I deal with there. A fixed location is something completely different than a pop up experience, and we treat that much differently with our teams and with the design and development of that.
Mhm. And and I'm sure there's a number of planetarium content creators listening to this going, "Oh man, I feel your pain. These venues that are almost custom, every single one that's built, almost somewhat similar, that can kind of share content." Now, in the planetarium world, they've come up with the full dome standard. Am I to assume there's no such thing as a flying theater standard at this point in time?
Yeah, I don't really think there's a standard, is there? You'd know that more. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think there's two alike that I know of actually. Well, maybe Disney East and West, Disney World and Land, but other
I
than
mean,
that,
there's
I'm not
certain
sure.
there's certain technical things that like with projection, you don't want to be closer than a certain amount to the screen. You start seeing the pixels, which is also why you get into LED, because LED is great. It was always too expensive. And now that the cost of LED is going down, then you have to have a pitch that's so fine that, it's all, you got to do a lot of testing. That's the bottom line. You just got to test. You got to physically go there and look and see, oh, what am I seeing here? Right.
That's a very good point that you bring up. Is the difference between LED and projection? I'm lucky to be able to work with both. And the price is coming down on the LED. We do a lot of LED domes that we can't talk about for government applications. As you can imagine, flight simulators is probably the easiest to do. But there's a lot of different simulations that are utilized. And the utilization of LED and projection is kind of going back and forth right now, as Valerie mentioned. Um, you can get some good brightness out of LED. It's great if there's ambient light around. If it's controlled light, projection is really good because you're never going to get right now the same pixelization as fine tuned as projection over LED. It's just not there. But as we know, we're seeing some large installations of LED, maybe not a dome, an eighth dome or something like the Sphere, obviously, is an experience that you should go see for yourself. And then most recently, my friends over at Cosm, I don't know if you've seen that, but Cosm is the new, sports centric kind of um, experience with the use of LED, and it's kind of a 180 where you're immersed in this and you get to really see where you're at, and that utilizes LED. But there's quite a difference between the two. LED is UV, so depends how long you're standing in front of LED before your eyes get exhausted. It's like staring at the sun. Projected reflective light is quite different in its psychology. If you see people in projected experiences, they walk right up to the screen, nose to the screen. There's something that attracts you about that. But it's just nuances in the psychology that are used. It's Disney, for example, does a lot of psychology, as we know. And there's very little LED in Disney because they know that. Is that changing? Sure. As things grow and emerge and evolve, there's going to be a place for both. But it's a very interesting time again that we're in to see this change in technology and what's going to prevail.
Yeah. And we'll get to, there's a question here in the Q&A I'm seeing that they want to challenge you to hear what, the immersive experience array will look like in 10 years. But before that, could you share, these are great, you guys are fantastic at doing things right. Can you take back the curtain a little bit and share things that were done wrong, or just things that we could learn from? What not to do? Any cautionary tales or pitfalls, please? From Jeff Nee. Thank you, Jeff. Whoever wants to go first. Joe, you got that face.
I'm trying. I'm trying to not,
That
hold
okay?
anybody
Yeah.
out to draw.
Don't disparage, but Valerie, yeah. thoughts
I
of
would just
pitfalls?
say you've just gotta, for example, you gotta previs everything, because if you just jump in and start creating without approvals and like the whole thing in mind, you'll go down rabbit holes and have to redo it. The whole look at the plans, meet with the team. So don't keep yourself in a silo, right? The creative team has to work with the project management team and really be in sync on these. There's so much that can go wrong that's just expensive to have to redo. Content wise, you uh don't there's yeah, in any dome there's crosstalk, so you have to look at like the color of the sky. Uh, you can't have your ideal summer days sometimes. I'm just saying in certain situations, you just have to look at all the technical issues that you could be up against. And because that did happen with a project where it wasn't a dome, but it was two opposing curved screens. And oh no, they wanted that California sky. They weren't going to make it cloudy and gray, but it ruined the whole show because there was a lot too much light in the room. So there's a lot of things that you have to just test and try out. If I think of another one, I'll do it. There's a lot of things not to do, but
Yeah.
We can
yeah,
jump
but
between you two. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, even when we get into stereography, there's a lot more rules that you have to play by if you've
Hold,
got that.
hold
So
on that one. Hold on the
okay.
3D in a second. We'll come back to that. Joe, any thoughts of not what to do? And then we'll get into the 3D
Yeah.
question.
Well, again, on the mechanics and aspect of it and the construction aspect, there's so many great people that have been doing this for such a long time, the electrosonics of the world, and there's too many to name that we work with. Those things can always be overcome. I don't know of an experience. Well, everything is some challenge somewhere within that project, right? I don't know of anything that stopped the project due to mechanics or building in nature. Everything can overcome. I will say I am not very attracted to projects that don't have good IP or content because I think that's the biggest mistake. I get on calls with people and we got a budget and here's the size of the building. Great, great, great. I can start working on that for you. And then I'm like, well, what is it? What are we doing? What's the vision? And there is none. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. I thank you for getting, thank you for calling and getting. I said, but you got to start with content, you know. And if you need introductions to a Valerie or something, that's what a network does, right? So I'm always engaging people with integrators, designers, if they come to me first, and vice versa. I get a lot from all those parties, well, on the projection side and on the mechanic side of the visual output, there's Joe. But if you haven't done content, I'm like, here's a few people that call it, you got to start with content, right? So for me, the biggest mistake is not doing that well, not creating good IP. And you've seen some of that, Valerie, in Malaysia, where it's just like, hey, just put some stuff on the wall and people will show up. It's not necessarily the case. They may show up once, but are they going to tell anybody about it? That's the key, right? So for me, it always goes back to content, which isn't my, skill set, quite honestly. But if it doesn't excite me to get involved in a project, then I don't think it's not going to be a success. So
Yeah, I just say, and don't assume anything, right? Get feedback. Don't assume anything because you assume, oh, they're taking care of that, right? And then you get there and then no, they didn't take care of that. Or, oh, I had it translated into Chinese, but you had it translated by a Taiwanese and the Chinese hate the Taiwanese. And so you have to re-record everything. There's always those kind of things, but those are very specific.
yeah, and don't do anamorphic 3D, please. No more anamorphic 3D. You can do 3D in a lot of different gags. You can do holograms, on the cheap. You can do a lot of, quite honestly, some of the most exciting immersive experience I've done are very small. Sleep No More in New York. Some of these things where it's just storytelling and immersion, and you're a part of it. If you do that well, you got it. You don't. I'm a technology guy. It's what pays the mortgage, but you really don't need all of that. It doesn't start there. It starts with what's the experience, what's the vision, what's the storyline. Are people going to get excited and tell other people about this? For me.
That's great. Let's maybe just quickly talk about 3D because 3D in domes in planetariums is a thing, does exist. And our friends, I think, at the Fulldome Festival Brno have an entire category to 3D, and it's a little controversial in the dome world. What are your guys' feelings on in the flying theater world? Is it necessary? Does it add more than it detracts wearing the glasses? Just maybe your quick thoughts.
I would say as long as your sight lines, as long as you are really immersed, you're in. Sometimes it's 3D CGI, right? That you're moving through anyway. So I don't think in those cases you need stereography. Um, but you also have to look at, yeah, it's kind of cumbersome to wear the glasses. Then you have to figure out what kind of glasses, because if you're moving and you're tilting, right, and you have polarization that is like vertical, horizontal, as soon as you turn your head, you lose your 3D. So you restrict the freedom of the audience sometimes by doing that. So there are pros and cons.
Yeah. I also, well, for me, bottom line is I don't enjoy it, quite honestly. If it's distracting to me, it doesn't immerse me. Um, if I'm wearing some sort of headset, it's just my nature. It's just distracting to me. It pulls me out of the experience. It's like somebody opening a door in a movie theater. It's just, it's tough. It's really tough to do. And they've tried numerous things and to some great results. It didn't work that great in cinema. And you're sitting there alone, right? And it can be an expense that's you don't expect, especially with active glasses and especially coming into the pandemic and cleaning of the glasses. It's laborious and it can be expensive. And quite honestly, I think we've seen attractions not to be named that have pulled away from 3D and changed the content to go without. I think you can really immerse if you do it well, you're immersed. I don't necessarily need 3D. If you really want 3D without the headsets, there's great gags. Pepper's Ghost has been around for I don't know how long. You can do some really cool stuff with a scrim and a back screen to create a 3D effect. I've done it all up and down, the Vegas Strip and in many different places. And Princess Cruise Lines uses it to a great effect in their theaters. You can do some really cool holographic to give you that 3D effect. But for me, the utilization of any kind of wearables at this point in time isn't there. And that harkens back, Ryan. I don't want to, but it harkens back to your question about where things are going with immersive because it was all AR VR for a minute, right? AR VR was everything, and you are immersed in AR VR. But for me, it's in the future, it's going to be a blend of some sort of both. It's not going to be all AR and VR experience. It's not going to be walking around the room with headsets on a on a hollow stage. I think it's going to be an aspect of our lives in our futures and entertainment. But I also think you're never going to get out of the communal experiences about being in this thing together and sharing that experience and sharing that energy. So I think it's going to be some sort of blend of both. But we're doing some really good technology things where it mimics AR and VR. And you can do that without headsets. You can do that. I'm not crushing that industry, but again, I think it's going to be a blend of both as we move forward in an immersive experience. Can you have a personalized immersive experience and see all these creations that Valerie and others have done all over the world? I would love to put a headset on and see something in Wu Tang, you know, or I would also like to go down the street and see it myself and be, practical and see that. So it can open the experience to others, by region and geography, but I think it's going to be a blend of both moving forward.
My favorite part
Yeah.
of like we couldn't have done like King Kong 360 3D without glasses, right? It was the
Yeah.
perfect solution to bringing the show to the tram, make you believe that you're really there. You have to worry about angles, things like that. But ironically, my next project is going to be on OLED monitors, right? It's 3D CGI, or create it and pitch it with VR, right? Use VR as a tool to sell something, and then
Oh yeah.
set it up. So they all can be combined, right? Depends on the ultimate product, the goal of the experience, like what you
And,
use. They
and
can all be
Valerie,
used.
I will tell you that I just went to Universal with 8 high school students. And first time they were on King Kong, they were all hemming and hawing, oh, what is this? What is this? And they were all screaming. by the time they got AdWords. So it still works in those cases. Before it was King Kong, it was what, Earthquake? There was all these different things.
It was nothing. We built that. That was
King Kong the first
stuck on the side of the hill. Yeah,
But
it was.
it's
It was
still-
a physical attraction that burned down with a animatronic.
Yes, right.
So then we
But-
made the new one. That's
Oh my
funny.
God. Bunch of
Awesome to hear. And we upgraded them. When we built that, I wanted 4K projectors, but Christie didn't have them yet in 2010. They were just coming out with them. So now it's been upgraded to the Christie 4Ks. I'm dying to see it. Do you know anybody there? Just kidding.
It is really interesting to hear your thoughts on 3D. One thing that I also experienced a little bit is I went to Regal's 4DX, which was supposed to be beyond 3D, and they always had the 3D glasses, and they showed the Twisters films. I actually watched the original 1996 Twister in 4DX. No glasses, no 3D effects whatsoever. I mean, they had the seats turned up to 11, like popcorn was flying. It was fantastic. It got soaked with water in the face. But it not so much the 3D effects were needed at all, as much as like that one moment where it hits you in the back of the neck with the air jet and it feels like you've got something roaring down on you. So this, yeah, I kind of want to actually get a little more of your thoughts on the future, but I want to get to a big burning question. You've got these individual theaters that are somewhat built around these individual programs. And we have a whole bunch of really, really curious, immersive producers that have programs that are like, hey, we built this for XYZ, a planetarium show or something, but we're finding it's actually really powerful when you tilt it that 90 degrees and then fly people through it. If you were encouraging a producer who had a show and they were like, how do I maybe get it into one of these theaters? The quick answer might be, well, you can't. This theater is purpose built just for this. But avoiding that answer, what advice might you give these producers?
I was at an event last night. I asked somebody how projects get into the MSG sphere, and I was told if you show up with a big bag of money, that's how you get in. That's the only way to get in. No, boy, I think you need to kind of get into a company then where you're involved on the team for a project, because it's really difficult to just show up somewhere unless it is formatted for a facility. You should be able to, like a distribution, go to a place like a Cimex, uh that does, I don't know, that's kind of a none of the facilities are really formatted the same. I mean, you can go to the planetariums, right? Isn't there a way to get your project into planetariums to
Well,
submit?
yeah, these would be planetarium projects that are being brought over. So a number of our artists, or even moving into narrative type films. I know Mesmerica did this. I believe Ruth Colson and Graham Watts' film, The Moonraker, did this as well, or not Moonraker. That's the James Bond film. But it's a question where they're like, hey, how can I get into this space? Is it going directly to the companies that operate these essentially? Is that the only option, is you besides the money?
But, my point on that is, and just dealing and keeping in touch with, when I partner with people, I'm there through the whole process. And a lot of times the content's designed up front, not necessarily Dome, because that's a show, and that, like Soaring, just plays, right? Plays on. They just refresh it or in the process now. But in other aspects, I always tell people in the content business, you're in a great place for the next foreseeable future, because everything right now is a content suck. It's everybody needs content. It's how do you get involved? I think it's a platform of a call to artist. If I'm involved with anything, I do a call to artist. If there's any festivals or events that I'm doing, Dome Fest West, I think it's a great place to showcase your content, because there are people that are going to need content. How you get in the door of that, there's nuances to each. How do you get into the sphere as opposed to how do you get into an Area 15? There's different ways in there. And again, I think it's all a lot of network. But again, most of them need content. In a lot of cases, they will design their own content. Content's very expensive. So if you have good IP or have a good story, there is a need out there. And I think if you're in a content business, finding a home for that and how to format to that is great. Doing everything in like an Unreal Engine right now is seems to be the most popular because that can be formatted and transported in different areas. But yeah, I mean, everybody I know, these places need content and they're starting to really change. Once it plays out and ticket sales start dropping, there's seasonal content and different. So there's Halloween content. There's always something going on that you need to make changes and you need to keep things current, just like a movie playing. You know.
So so maybe would be your advice in the content creation phase, seeing as that it's hard to say, yeah, get good at networking, become friends with all of the people that do these things. But what you could do is when you're creating a project, would you recommend, yeah, choosing a tool like Unreal or shooting equirectangular where you're over capturing? And so you have the ability to then reformat quickly? Is that kind of maybe a key to getting into these spaces? Is that there is the flyover series. There's Chicago, Las Vegas, I think New York, but
Jersey City or something. I don't know.
there's a number of them, and they have some sort of a content pipeline. We don't have one of their representatives here on the call, unfortunately, but there is venues like you said they're built. There's opportunity. There's a content suck. Is it really the only thing content creators right now they can do is just be prepared to reformat?
Yeah, I'd say making it as versatile as you can, right? If you're going to go to the expense of creating something, not knowing what the venue is,
Mhm.
you're taking a big gamble. But if there is there, I don't even know, is there like Dome Fest is a time where you can put your project in. Is that the only one? Is there no film festival for planetariums?
The There is, and yeah, our community will say, "Yes, yes, our film festivals." There's, about 6 or 7 of them,
Yeah.
and, most of them are in Europe. Yeah, we are the only one in the United States that's dedicated to full dome films. There's the Portland, Cinema and Animation Festival, and there's the Macon Film Festival. They accept dome submissions. There's also really great work that's happening in Canada, and of course, we wanna shout out our friends, Full Dome UK, Full Dome Festival in Jena and Brno, as well as in Brazil, Russia, and Japan. There's really a lot of different places, but yeah, our goal is to give people a chance to see this content that so oftentimes is created for a place that you have to travel to, and it is somewhat location gated. Maybe this is a good time to jump into the future, and then we're going to get into answering directly the audience's questions. But yeah, what do you see maybe as the future potential for these flying theaters, and maybe if you could tie in any potential you see of planetarium content, that immersive content that takes up the sky, does it have a place in these new LBE immersive experiences? Just kind of free thoughts. Either one of you want to go first?
I'll say what I've seen, like as far as the pop-ups go, right? Why they couldn't take some of the content that was done for planetariums because, as long as you don't have cued special effects that make your content make sense, should be able to play it anywhere. So I love the Wisdom. Ed Lance also should, I hope he has that Dome uh, series, out and about because those are perfect places to go in. Hey, I got a show, charge admission. There should be a setup, ideally, where people could bring their content because unless you have a big IP attached to it, chances are you're not going to get the attention of
Mm,
the MSG spheres or the cosms. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I think cosm is something new, but it just seems like you should be able to take your content, go to a pop-up type facility to to see if you can make money off it. Because that's what some of the film distribution places are doing now, right? It's hands-on, get in there, find an audience.
Yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
them instead of them finding you.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah.
and I like the versatility of the smaller aspects of the domes, right? Because you can have different experience in there. You can have a cinematic experience with the content in the dome and or planetarium, but you can also flip that and do many things during the day. So can you do a morning yoga session? Can you do just a peaceful meditation thing? That's
A
happening
rave.
too, and they're great, right? And it's a great way to utilize that space and be versatile to have not one show in the evening, one primary show, but other different aspects during the day and gain that. So I think the content is right. I think it's great, and it is the delivery device, that we get our content from, um, and anyone that can produce content, you know, I love the planetariums. That's where it all started for me. Was planetariums. That was the original multimedia experience. Back in the day before it was anyone heard of immersive. So, but I think it's very interesting. But again, that content can be varied, and whatever your passion is, focus on that and try to get it out and try to get involved. And again, I think if these companies did call to artists, if they need, they'll do a call to artists. I wish there was a more of a platform that can be utilized for that, so it's more aware. I try posting any of my partners. I post on LinkedIn. Call to artists. Here's look at these guys. And just you know get in there. It's tough.
Li- LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn is kind of the main answer, a little bit. That, and then if you can talk to whoever is running the flyover venues, which I do think are our friends, but we're not entirely certain quite yet exactly who it is, which I'm sure when I rewatch this, I will be yelling at myself. But anyways, we're excited about the the audience impressions that these flying theaters, a fairly recent uh, technology, theme park technology that has come into the space, that really has created its own entire category of rides, just putting people inside domes, thrusting them in. We can blame our friend Douglas Trumbull if we want. We can give him credit. I don't know. Sometimes depends on how your project's going, if you want to yell at him or not. But we give him credit, and of course, the immersive community on popularizing his amazing efforts within the planetarian community and helping them understand what he's done. All right, so Ed, I would love to bring you in if you don't mind, and see if there's any questions that we should go ahead and hit. Do you want to, yeah, ask Joe or Valerie directly any of your favorites?
While he's
Sure thing.
doing that, I will say I got to bring Douglas Trumbull to see King Kong at 60 frames a second. He was like a little kid in a candy shop. He loved it.
He loves the 60 frames.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's so funny. I mean, since you mentioned 60 frames, Doug went to the Giant Screen Cinema Association and showed off his, I think it was even 120 frames, if I'm not mistaken. And people came out and they were milling around outside and they were like, "Oh, that was horrible." I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, you lose all the artistic. The 24p is just like such
No
a great
blur.
artistic medium." And I'm thinking, gosh, okay, well, I'm always trying to simulate reality, which is what the flying theaters are. They are really the most powerful media delivery systems on the planet, in terms of simulator systems open to the public anyway. So there's some pretty incredible military simulators that never see the light of day. But when I worked at Spitz, we made screens for a lot of those. But yeah, there's an interesting conversation. The LED versus projection one is very interesting because it's a moving target. And when a screen curves back in on itself, it bounces the light around and can wash out a bit. And now the flying theaters are not usually not a complete hemisphere. Is that correct? And I'm curious, what steps do you take to sort of prevent that cross bouncing light?
Yeah, well, you can Yeah, in a dome, you don't have as much crosstalk like you do in two opposing curved screens, like King Kong. That was a huge problem we had to take a look at, right? You wouldn't put a light sun because you'd see it on the other side, or you did it low where the tram itself blocked, that bounce. So you have to design the screen so that it's a complex compound curve. I know that, but with the domes, Joe, you can answer that better than I can. I don't think you have that issue, only on the edges.
Well, and that's why you're probably seeing a lot of these domes is really just an eyelet. It's 180. When you
Hemisphere,
really,
yeah.
I'm working on a dome right now with it's not really good. Let's call it a dome for lack of a better term, but it's a large immersive experience, 360 degrees. So you get a lot of crosstalk, right? So you're trying to, and I've been working on this for a very long time, of getting projection, and it's 100 projectors in this. So how do you not get the bounce of light is one aspect. The other challenge is always now with immersive sound. So we're trying to push sound out through the structure of this building through the screens. So it's got to be audio passive screens, very similar to the Adele show was one of my Las Vegas experiences where she's using a black projected screen with 17 50,000 lumen projectors, but we're pulling audio through that. So it's got to be passive, but screen material for 60,000 square foot of space is a challenge in itself. So it's a very interesting challenge when you're really talking about a 360 dome head. But we're working very hard to try to work on that. And again, there's not a lot of things we overcome, but it's also working with the sound people out there, like my friends at Hollow or D&B or L Acoustics, who are working very hard on digital sound for these, like was used in the Sphere. So it's very interesting where we're going. It's much easier to contain that aspect and moire and blending and mapping and doing everything you need to in that dome experience or half dome experience, if you will, which is kind of like a planetarium, right? Fisheye lens, and you're covering the whole space. But as things grow and evolve, it's becoming more and more challenging, quite honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is an issue in domes as well, Valerie. It's a if you have a complete sphere, it's like it's called an integrating sphere in optics. They actually make it super white inside, inject the light, and it integrates. It washes all around. And that's exactly what you don't want. And if you put a checkerboard on most domes, you'll get 10-to-1 maybe contrast between the white and the black squares because of all that washout. And the only solution I really know, I mean, there might be micro, what do you call it, surfaces that have microstructures that can redirect light or whatever. But short of that is making the dome darker. And when you make the dome darker and darker, like a charcoal gray even, then the secondary scatter reflections get attenuated a second time, whereas the primary to the eye is attenuated only once. And so the contrast ratio gets better and better the darker the dome. But that's good for the projector manufacturers, because you have, right?
That is a challenge, right? So gray is our friend. And
yeah, that's right.
The question of Leo, he's got in the questions here that I'm reading the same thing. It looks like Leo had a project where he's filming Antarctica. So if it's too white, you got issues. If it's too dark,
and the LED,
you have other issues. They're not the same issues, but it's a challenge of blending and mapping. So that color and contrast that you're dealing with, especially on those heavy whites and heavy dark contents in the projection side, not so much LED on the projector side, can be a challenge.
That's right. That's right.
There was a situation with the screen with the screen content, or not the content, the way you make whatever the screen physical property is, right? For King Kong, we had Spitz nanoseam screen spec'd for it. Well, then we were so close to it that prior to showtime, we had been doing our tech rehearsal and all of our planning on Luon, like screen goo, Luon. Well, when it came time to install the project, we ditched the spit screen and turned it into the audio wall on either side of the tram. We scrapped all that split screen to use it because we preferred the look of the screen goo on Luon because you could see with white clouds, you saw every pixel, every
The
every
problem
perf,
with the
every
perforated,
perforation on the screen you saw, unless it
yeah,
was
if you get
black.
it too close, you're
Yeah,
not at unlimited
yeah.
resolution, and you will see the perfs. And
And
it's the same with LED.
I personally swapped out the sky on Fast and Furious because the creative director, the the VFX supervisor wouldn't listen to me about the color of the skies, and we had to literally roto out the sky and turn it into a cloudy afternoon for
Yep.
Fast and Furious.
This is
It's
the
crazy.
film producers know that well, and often you put even a gradient and fade darker as you go behind your head, and you still got the peripheral vision, which is why you want pixels back there, but you don't want them casting light. And then also when you produce, yes, the sky, and the worst thing in a planetarium. I mean, a lot of planetariums are just a level dome. There's no tilt. And so you're looking up a lot, and if you shoot with a 360 camera, it's mostly the sky, clouds, and like that. It's hard to, and so the live action usually doesn't look as good in projection domes as animated, where you have full control over that, or if you use visual effects. Yeah. There's a question here from Joe. I mean, he's asking about music and audio, and I'm curious because IMAX. I think they have a 6.1. Pretty much they use in a lot of domes. You see a lot of 7.1. 5.1 is kind of the industry standard, but in a flying theater, everything's like you can't put sound behind, or why would you even? I mean, what sort of audio configurations are we seeing in these theaters?
Well, again, when you're dealing with that kind of surface, what we're dealing with mostly is the new immersion of digital sound and the ability to fade and rotate digitally wherever that line is, right? In stereo. But again, that's emerging. It's been a challenge. They worked very hard to get that perfected at the Sphere with the hollow plot system that's in there. And I've done other things, utilizing digital sound behind the screen, having to deal with that passive both ways, still reflecting light, getting the audio out. But it's got to come from the front, and it's certainly traditional. Again, scale is scale and budget is budget. I've seen some great things happen, which hang in some nice, hardy speakers overhead. But if you really want true immersion, you have to have that digital sound system, and that's something that actually my son is at college right now learning about because I think it's a great digital sound is a great future. It's one of those things. If you're in that industry, it's going to be a long time coming because you have to work on that. And the only way we've seen that is to that audio reflection, especially in a 360 or in a dome, can be overcome quite easily with a good digital audio system. Budget being conscious of.
That's great. Yeah, we did a small flying theater pop-up almost. You would think of it with fabric screen for the Sheikh of Dubai, and it was $1 million theater just to fly him over his new development that he was doing, and the screen was very reflective of sound. You couldn't put speakers behind it because it attenuated too much. We ended up actually putting the speakers behind it, reflected them off the screen, and it worked really well. But of course, the viewing volume was small. We just had one motion platform bench, and he flew using his hand, allowed him to steer through the virtual world. It was a cool project, but yeah, I think you can't reflect the sound off of the dome if because the sound you get depends on the seat, unless you have a small viewing volume. Like they do that in simulators where you have a cockpit and you're stationary, everything is tuned to that head volume, you know. But in the theater, you have larger, and this is where holoplot really comes in because if people don't know what holoplot is, it's each speaker cabinet is an array of speakers, a phased array. I think there's 16. there's the highs and then the mids, and then they don't. It's hard to do phased arrays with subs because it's such a long wavelength. But it actually you can do beam forming. And so, in a dome, you have a hotspot. If you sit on the left speaker is like in your face, and you can't hardly hear the right speaker. But you can start to equalize the sound pressure level across the floor, so that you have more even sound as you move between the speakers. Because the right speaker that you're not close to is being boosted towards the left, and the left speaker is being reduced in that spatial area. So like that, this is pretty cool stuff, and it works pretty good, right, at the sphere. I mean, so
It works good. I've used it in numerous installations. I've used Holoplot in 4 different luminarium locations around the world, and it is great. It gives you another ability to immerse, as you said, Ed. If you're standing there, if you ever get a chance to do a Holoplot demo at any of the shows, please do so. It's quite amazing. But as you mentioned, it's very organic. It's like us having a conversation in a room. I take a step to the right, that conversation fades a bit, but I could still kind of hear it. And then this conversation becomes closer. So it's a very organic feel. And they do that with the beam forming. So in the sphere, the theory is wherever you're sitting, you have a concert experience left and right because they're projecting it, trying to get at every seat level for your own personalized experience. I think there's some 1,600 you know, units in the sphere. But we've done it with great effect with other things. But again, I think the nature of that is certainly emerging and changing as they continue to develop that technology. Just another point of immersion, just like putting air in the back of your neck, right? So it's always something's always changing.
that's great. Mindy is asking, when we say make the dome darker, do we mean the screen itself or ambient light in the dome? It is the screen itself, just
The
to be
content.
clear. Well, it's both, but
Both.
if you make the screen itself darker, then your contrast ratio goes up with regards to scattered light. We call it checkerboard contrast. That you measure
Yeah.
it by projecting a checkerboard. All the white squares bounce around and wash out the black squares, and you can get like 30-1, but you have to go down to like a 10% reflectance. It's just ridiculous in a hemisphere. So yeah, and we did a dome for Paul Allen, the Hollow Dome, and it was I call it a pumpkin dome. It's psyched up, but we used because it was almost a whole sphere. We used 13% reflectance screen, and then of course you have to boost. That means like if you have 10% reflectance, then you have to have 10 times the lumens from your projectors to get the image back up to what it would have been off of a 1-to-1, a 1.0 reflected screen. So, like I said, it's good for projector manufacturers if you're trying. But then with
Yeah.
LED, you have so much black. You have little blinky lights and a lot of black in between them. So the cross bouncing is quenched a lot more. You will see in the sphere and at COSM, if you have a bright thing on one side of the dome and complete black on the other, you'll see that specular reflection, off of, and it'll show like the structure of the panels. Actually, you'll see the structure of the panels because it's being illuminated by the other side of the screen. But by and large, the contrast and the blacks are really black. But I do have a question, and Joe, this is maybe more towards you. Is when you edge blend multiple projectors, when you fade to black, you get gray, right? Now, unless you pay $350,000 for Christie's high-end 1,000,000-to-1 contrast projector, maybe. but how do you deal with edge blending when you fade to black and you get gray? Now you can't blend in the gray because it's going to be you have twice the black level in the gray, and you can't make it any blacker than that electronically, right?
Mhm.
Like I've seen, in fact, I've used masks before, physical masks,
Sure.
to do blending, but in a 6 or a 9 or 10 projector configuration, that's just insane.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. And again, I'll harken back to that's one of the nuances of value about dealing with an OEM of the projectors directly, because us being involved in that, like you said, having that contrast can be challenging when you're dealing with that darks. And again, the black screen or black projection. In your case, Ed, as you mentioned, when you fade out and we're trying to fight those blending lines, it's a matter of brightness. So people mistakenly think that brightness overcomes pixels, but it's not always the case. So there's a science to this, and we have a lot of people that work on the project to see what do you want to see on the wall, what is your lux on the wall, what kind of pixel content, what is your content. All of those things combined result in a basic formula of what we're looking at. So when they're like, "Oh, I want the biggest and brightest projector," well, if you're shooting space, and that's what maybe you don't, or maybe that has to be dumbed down a bit. And there's other nuances about having a higher brightness projector running at 70%, but it gives you flexibility because brightness is not your friend in those cases. You have to fight a lot of those things, but it all really depends on your content, your screen material. I do like the black screens. I think with Christie, one of the reasons I was attracted to Christie myself was their RGB, their true laser. When you see true laser and not through a phosphorus wheel, which is the two technologies in projectors right now, phosphor wheel and true laser light, RGB. The nuance on a black screen is amazing. It gives you an experience very close to LED in a controlled lighting environment. I will put an asterisk to that. But again, each project is different and they all come with its challenges. But again, when we're involved, we're there to preload the content, pre-installation, burn everything in, test the content in a facility somewhere, if not our own, somewhere else, see what that looks like. And then we're there post-installation after the integrators and installers hang all the rigs and get everything set up. We're there for the burning in of the lenses in a gray screen to make sure that that focal line is always locked in. And then we sit there ourselves and work on mapping and blending and edge blending and doing everything we can to make it the best experience possible. But again, you're not just going to get that experience by buying a projector out of a box and throwing it in the ceiling. You're going to have those challenges. But Valerie can always fix it in post anyway, so what does it matter? Just give it back to
That's
Valerie.
right. That's right. That's yeah. I mean, one of the things I've seen done with blending your in the black, because planetariums they do a lot of black, right, with stars, and if you have those overlaps and you're not handling the blending of them, then you get this pattern on the dome where all the overlaps are, right? So one trick is to boost the gray level outside of the blends to match, and that works reasonably well. But then you cut your contrast in half over the whole dome instead of just over those areas. But Michael
Okay.
Dowd, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say let's go ahead and actually land this plane. Been going for about an hour 45. We do have some questions, but we're gonna hit these real quick, and we're gonna stay away from the statements. Real quick, what should be the duration of these shows? Lightning round, just maybe 10-second answer from each of you. Recommended duration.
I'll say for the Flying Theater, like a 5-minute ride works really well. And again, it's all based on the throughput that you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I think 5 to 8 minutes in the theater is great because you're going to have a turn of people as well. An immersive walkthrough experience, you know, 30 to 40 minutes in a constant roll before it loops, I think is a good value of once you pay a ticketed price to get in there with family. We see that people are starting to wander and move about anyway. So yeah, I agree with Valerie.
Great. Valerie, this one might be a little bit more towards you. Since there's so many different aspects, thinking about sensation, story, is there a strategy you have looking at it from a global point of view of planning these different elements?
Oh yeah, you have to time things out, right? You think about the pacing of the show and when you're going to accent something. So yeah, there's a whole script that we write out. It's a technical script, so you make sure that things aren't competing against each other. It's very much part of the creative concepting of the attraction when you write a script. So you write a technical script along with it, and yeah, kind of save the bigger events, right, for the climax of the piece. Just like a movie.
Think of it like a movie. Okay, that's awesome. Joe, you want to throw any thoughts in?
No, I completely agree.
All right. Well, then here, actually, this one's for you. This one's coming from Urs at Avocado 360. Up to now, screens have produced, most screens and these flying theaters have been produced with projections, but LED screens are the future. What will change and what will that look like? You've discussed it a little bit, but to answer that
Mhm.
directly, what will it look like?
Well, again, everything continues to evolve. So yes, LED is in a place now where it's become affordable. There's nuances to that, but again, I think in a lot of cases it's both. It can be they can complement each other in certain environments. LED has its nuances. Projection has its nuances. So I think it really depends on what the experience is, what the plan is, what the environment you're putting it in is. Um, we're all fighting heat, we're all fighting elements, we're all fighting light. Um, is LED the future? It's certainly come a long way in its affordability, but again, there's limitations to LED and there's psychology behind LED. Um, how close you get to it, and how what's your distance from that viewpoint, as opposed to projection. And it's really just what's right for your vision, what's right for the project. I think at Christie, I'm very lucky to have both of those elements, so I don't have to really go too far. And we look at that to see what it is, and still, it's getting closer in cost comparison. But right now, it's still projection still wins when you're talking about an ROI and cost right now. But projection's not right for every environment either. So it's really comes down to what's right for the vision. And when I work with clients, I put that hat on. I'm working for you as a client. I'm not here trying to shill everything manufacturers make. Um, kind of put a consulting hat on so I could say, well, what's right for the project? And we can look at that. You can't shoehorn technology in for technology's sake, is just my point.
Good point. Good point. And Valerie, any thoughts on LED? Just you excited about it? Another challenge, technical challenge, you said?
Yeah, just that it was very expensive when I first started getting introduced to it, right? And the closer you got, the worse the image got to me personally, right? You see all the individual pixel lights, but I mean, it's got its purpose. It's got its purpose, and because you don't. I mean, again, lights go out, issues happen, so there's a lot of maintenance that you have to think about, right? That's different maybe than a projection screen. Joe can answer that a little more, but because I've worked in virtual production as well, so right, that is a big deal when little,
Similar. Yeah.
it can be. So yeah, that's what I would say. It just depends on the purpose. The finer the pitch, the better, but it costs more. So that's just been my experience. I like it.
Agreed.
Awesome. All right. We have got a couple, looks like comments here, and then one more question. Immersive musical score. What are some of the variable considerations on immersive
Yeah, I
music?
mean, it's like you score. You typically don't just put background music in, right? I mean, you do maybe for the pre-show, but we work with. I saw one also question in there about like, do you go to the country of origin? So I've never had a Chinese score, right, for any of our attractions, but I work with like Brian Yessian. There's some great composers that provide that research, right? They know who they're dealing with, they know the style of music that, so you take a sample, right? You'll kind of ask the client, give us a sample. What do you like? Like who do you revere as a musician or as far as a score? And then you do something kind of like that. You typically want to not license music to do it. You want to create it so that you can highlight what the content is showing. And you blend it with the special effects, just like a movie. And you know that, oh, everybody's going to be screaming at that moment. So you don't want to lose things. You have to plan ahead and imagine what the viewer experience is like.
Yeah, I think it's a neat point that you bring up, who to utilize and where. And it goes back to some of the conversations of how to get involved and how do I get my content out there and these things. How do I break into this? Um, you have to realize this is not a very, when you look at the people involved in parks and experiences and domes, it's not a lot of people. You know, there it's global, you know, we're all over the place, but when you look at it, it's a pretty small group of people you can actually have a conversation with. So I would say to somebody trying to get in, you know, join Dome Fest West, join TEA is a
Yeah,
great
that's
experience, right? I've been a TA member for many, many years. You can actually go to mixers in your local area. TEA has mixers east, west, north, south, all over the world, APAC, you know, wherever you're at. And that's a place to meet those people. And that's the same people that you meet there are doing every park. You know, it's not a big group. So getting involved in those industries, finding out who they are, going through that expense and getting out there and meeting those folks in person, immerse yourself into those and don't do it all online. Actually get out and go hit a mixer and have a drink and talk with these people. Because Valerie, you know, I'm not speaking for you, but you tend to go to those people. Like, I know this person does this well. Who do you want for a score? I know I've worked with this person well. They can deal with adversity. They can deal with challenges. It's a small industry. And once you're in that industry, Ed, you know this well yourself. You know, people just go to you and you start getting experience if you're reliable and, you know, BS people and, you know, under promise and over deliver, you'll do well. So I just say get out there and join some of these activities, and you'll realize it's a very small group of people that has a very wide platform to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the Themed Entertainment Association is a key. There's also the Producers Guild if you're a producer, right? Because they have like a technology side to things. But there's also the emerging media for the Academy of TV Arts and Science that I'm not a member of yet, but now I have to be because I see all my friends going to events and I go, how come I'm not there? So got to keep up with this whole
Fear of
social.
missing out.
Huh?
Yeah.
Fear of missing out. Gotta go.
Yes, and we do want to shout out yeah, the amazing stuff that actually is happening locally in Los Angeles as well. Ed, I know that you've been working with the PGA and with the local SIGGRAPH group. Essentially,
Okay.
yes, go out, become known, know people, and then see where the world goes. Unfortunately, we don't have an easy on ramp for content yet to flying theaters, but uh, with both of your amazing perspectives this morning, this evening, depending on where people are watching it, I think a lot of creators have a better insight. So I just want to say huge thank you to both of you from Dome Fest West, from all of the attendees. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and perspectives. And with the amazing fireworks, that's how we're feeling. And ending with fireworks. Uh, do you mind either both of you doing a little shameless self promotion? Where can people get to know you, get in touch with you? And yeah, Joe, why don't you go ahead and start?
I would say the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where I get a lot of my activities and a lot of the networking done there. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can always find me there. I'm happy to have a conversation if you DM me. You can reach me at Joseph period Conover at ChristieDigital.com if you wish to hit me up directly. But happy to share and help in any way I can. It's not all just about doing business and looking for. I'm constantly helping people and trying to connect people with empty buildings, with people with content, and somebody that wants to build stuff, or investors that want to invest in immersive. So I'm trying to always help make a handshake and introduce people. So happy to share a few moments of my time in the evening sitting on the couch on LinkedIn on my phone.
Wow. Oh, I'm calling you after this. After this, I too am on LinkedIn. And if any of you are in Miami for Sea Trade in April of 2025, I should have something fun to look at there. But I'm on LinkedIn, so you could reach out. I'll ping back.
Very, very cool. Yes, thank you to you both. And then also, yes, thank you, Ed, so much for helping run our background and keeping everyone spotlit and our questions rolling in from Q&A. We are going to end the session promoting our next awesome Fulldome Forum that is coming up October 9th. This is October 10th. That is the wrong date. So it's going to be October 9th. this graphic is old. But we are going to be talking with the Digitalis team and maybe some other friends about some cost-effective full dome projection solutions. Essentially, if you're an indie creator, you got this amazing film. Now, what do you do with it? Are there options not just for portables, but ways to set up a small dome in your local community? I'm sure that's going to mean that you're going to be hearing more from Joe and Christy, and then maybe Valerie will come in and teach you how to upgrade it with some Independence Day IP. What is a fun program to be a part of?
It's fun to be
Great
on it.
forum, guys. This is a lot of fun. Really,
We're very lucky to be in this industry. It's, as I said, it's nice getting paid by smiles on people's faces. I thank you all today for your time and this experience.
Same here.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.